My husband Brian always had secrets. At first, I chalked it up to his job. He worked as a traveling salesman, and the job often meant long hours and nights away. He'd come home exhausted, but never talked much about his trips. I tried to respect his boundaries, but over time, something began to feel off. I couldn't pinpoint it, but a woman's intuition is rarely wrong. My name is Julie, and I've been married to Brian for 7 years. 7 years of bliss, heartbreak, and lately, resentment. The fight started about 4 years in when I brought up having children. I've always wanted kids. To feel life growing inside me, to nurture and love a child, to build a family, that was my dream. But every time I broached the subject, Brian would shut down. At first, he dodged the question.
We'll talk about it later.
Why later? You've said that before. Is something wrong? Why don't you want to talk about this?
No, nothing is wrong. Why are you always so paranoid? I just have a lot to think about right now. My boss is breathing down my neck demanding I make more sales. I'm just under a lot of stress right now, that's all. We'll talk about this soon, I promise.
Later turned into months and then years, until it was clear. Brian didn't want children. He avoided it like a plague, and that tore me apart. We'd argue. Oh, how we'd argue. I'd plead with him, telling him how much I wanted a baby, how I felt incomplete. Brian, I just really feel like I have a lot of love to give. Plus, when you're gone, I feel so lonely.
Julie, we're not ready. We can't financially afford a kid right now. We just have to be patient.
His words felt like slaps to my face. Each time I asked, he would have a different excuse. Either we didn't have the money for it, or he was under too much stress, or he was worried that he just wasn't mature enough for a child. All of these would have made more sense if he hadn't had the opposite position before we had gotten married. Before then, he had said that he had wanted a big family, and that he couldn't wait to have children. For him to have made a complete change of mind made me feel like maybe I was the problem. The tension escalated, and soon we weren't just fighting about kids. I began to notice him acting very cagey. His work meant that he would have late nights and frequent business trips. But when he began making secretive phone calls in other rooms, or when he didn't know I was home, it all piled up. I couldn't hear who he was talking to or what those calls were about, but it sounded fishy. He was hiding something. One evening, after another round of shouting over his refusal to start a family, Brian packed a small suitcase for yet another business trip. He was always so vague about where he was going. That night, I stared at our bank account, watching the money flow in steadily from his sales commissions. The money was good, better than good, actually, and I couldn't help but wonder what he was really doing on those trips. I had to wonder if the money was worth all this worry and pain. I spent that weekend alone, drinking wine and scrolling through social media, when something caught my eye. A friend of a friend, someone I barely knew, had jokingly tagged Brian in a post. They joked that they had found his doppelganger. The person was friends with the person that had taken the photo and had found the resemblance humorous. It was nothing much, just a photo of a man and 2 little boys playing at a park. The man had his back to the camera, but the resemblance was uncanny. That broad-shouldered, sandy-haired figure looked an awful lot like my husband. My stomach dropped. I was curious, so I clicked on the photographer's profile and scrolled through her pictures. The profile belonged to a woman who was in the photos with Brian, because it was him. I was sure of it now. She looked happy, her smile wide and bright, like she had everything she ever wanted. There were more pictures. Brian holding a baby girl, Brian at a family barbecue, Brian with the same 2 boys from the park. I felt like I was going to be sick. The comments confirmed that the children in the photos were Brian's, and this woman, Bree's children, 3 children. Brian had 3 children with her. I spent the next several hours digging through profiles, tracking down anyone associated with that woman. Her name was Bree. I learned her kids' names. I even found out where she lived. The pieces began to fit together. The late nights, the secrecy, the dodging of my questions about having children. It wasn't that Brian didn't want kids. He already had them and didn't want more. And that wasn't all. In the web of social media posts and photos, I found something else. A third woman. Her name was Rachel, and she was Brian's girlfriend. He wasn't just living a double life. He was living a triple life. While he was supposed to be working as a traveling salesman, Brian had somehow built entire lives with other women. He wasn't just my husband, he was Bree's husband too. And Rachel? Well, she was the mistress. I stared at my phone, feeling betrayed, humiliated, and consumed by rage. How had he gotten away with this? I wasn't some clueless woman, and yet, here I was. My husband had 3 children with another woman, a mistress on the side. And I was here, alone, waiting for him to come home from his business trip. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. That night, I drained every penny from our joint bank account. I didn't care how much he made or how well he'd hidden his other lives. Everything in that account was mine now. I called a lawyer the next morning, filing for divorce. I didn't tell Brian. I wanted him to come home, to return to me like nothing was wrong, so I could watch the realization dawn on his face. But days passed, and instead of Brian, I got something else. A phone call from Bree. Somehow, she had figured out that Brian wasn't just living a lie with me. He had been lying to her too. Her voice shook with fury and pain, but there was something else in her tone. Something that sent a chill down my spine.
He told me I was the only one. And now I find out I'm the second wife? I've been his second wife for years while he's off gallivanting with you and God knows who else?
I'm sorry, I only just discovered all this weekend. And for him to have a mistress too.
Oh, you have nothing to be sorry for. I'm actually not angry with you. But what is this about a mistress?
I found a post that led me down a rabbit hole to find a woman named Rachel. He's been seeing her for a few months now.
That lying piece of shit. If I ever see Brian again, I swear, I will kill him.
The line went dead, but I didn't doubt her for a second. It wasn't long before Brian called. I had expected it. His accounts were probably frozen, and he must have known something was wrong. But when I answered the phone, the voice on the other end wasn't the calm, confident Brian I had once known. He was frantic.
Julie, please, you have to help me. I'm in trouble. Something is wrong with our bank accounts and I'm in danger.
Why would I help you?
What do you mean? I'm your husband. Why wouldn't you help me?
Because I know about Bree and Rachel, you filthy pig. The phone went silent for a minute. I could practically hear the panic on the other end.
I'm very sorry about all that, but none of it meant anything to me. You were the only one that I ever loved. Please, I'm in danger. Bree is not a very stable person and she's losing it. I didn't know how she found out, but I'm guessing that she spoke to you. She's threatening to kill me, and I don't know what to do. I have nowhere to go. Please, Julie. I made a mistake.
A mistake? A mistake is forgetting our anniversary, or leaving your dirty socks on the floor. What you did, Brian, is not a mistake. It's monstrous.
Julie, I'm sorry. I know I messed up. I love you. I need you. Just meet me. We can talk this through. I'll make it right. I promise.
I was past being furious. I wanted revenge and to make him suffer. He had stolen years of my life and had made countless promises to me that he broke. Suddenly, I had a dark and evil plan. Okay, Brian, I'll meet you. Tomorrow afternoon. Let's talk it out. I gave him directions to a park that was in between where we and Bree lived. He sighed with relief. Meet me there and we can talk. I won't promise that I will take you back, but I will listen to what you have to say.
Thank you, Julie. You don't know how much this means to me. Thank for at least hearing me out.
After hanging up, I sat in the quiet of our now empty home. My heart raced, not from anxiety, but from the thrill of what I was about to do. I picked up my phone once more and dialed a number. When Bree answered, I calmly told her exactly where Brian would be tomorrow.
Thank you. I'll handle the rest.
The next day, I didn't go to the park. I went to a cafe instead, sipping my coffee as I imagined the scene playing out in that quiet, unsuspecting park. Bree would be there, waiting for Brian. I later found out that Bree had indeed been quite unstable, and when Brian showed up to the park, she stabbed him to death. It was all over the news. Police came and asked me questions, and I told them the full truth of what had happened. For a time, they tried to charge me being an accessory to the crime, but there wasn't enough to go on. And Bree and I didn't know each other, so they couldn't prove that I had anything to do with what she had done. I do feel bad for their children, but I do know that they are living with Bree's sister, and as far as I know, they are doing well. Bree did end up going to prison for several years, and oddly enough, we have become pen pals. Beyond that, I started going to therapy, which has really helped me to work through the trauma of what Brian did to me. So much so that I feel like a much stronger person for it. He had a life insurance policy that paid me over $1 million when he died. I felt that since he had wronged Bree and that technically she was also his wife, that I should give her half of the money. It was only fair. With that, I was able to restart my life, and after a couple of years, I started dating again. Not long after that, I met Stuart, and not only are we about to celebrate our first wedding anniversary, but tonight I get to surprise Stuart with the news that he is going to be a father as well. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel.